video, I'm going to be discussing the principles of design. Now, if you're a graphic designer, especially if you are a beginner designer, then you need to pay attention to this video because I'll be explaining the principles, which are like the presets, the rules that you need to observe if you want to be able to make professional, good-looking designs that meet basic standards. So stay with me as I explain these principles one after the other. So let's just get started. But before I proceed, if it's your first time on my channel, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, because that's the only way you can support me, and make sure that you keep seeing more and more content like this on the channel. So let's get right into it. So the first principle that I'll be talking about is called contrast. Now, contrast is one of the most basic rules every designer must observe. You'll be asking, what does contrast mean? It's simple. Contrast is the difference between elements in a design that makes them stand out from each other. So let me explain. So in a design, you have text, you would have images, you would have shapes, you would have some PNGs. These are distinctive elements that make up the design. Now, if you observe, you can see that you did not just use only images in your entire design. You use images, you use text, you use shapes, and maybe you use PNGs. You understand? So that is contrast being observed, which means these different elements are, distinct from each other. They are unique. So that's what it means to actually observe contrast in your design. Now, the next principle I'll be talking about is balance. Now, what does balance mean? Balance refers to when elements are placed symmetrically. Two sides of an equal shape or size are placed side by side. Now, if you look at this diagram right here, you can see that I placed these are two similar shapes or even the same shapes, and I placed them side by side. Now, what that means is this design is balanced. It is not asymmetrical and it is not disorganized. So which means when you are using things like text in your design, when you're using things like shapes in your design or other PNGs, you need to make sure that they are placed at the right position where they communicate with other elements. You understand? You cannot place your text at one point and place another block of text at one point whereby they do not even connect. You understand? You need to make sure that your elements are placed at the right position where they are able to work together to unify the design. That is very important. The next principle I'm talking about is called emphasis. Now, emphasis refers to when I did not prepare this particular slide very well. I wrote something else here, but yeah, let me talk about emphasis. Emphasis is when you use a particular element to signify importance. You understand? So for instance, if I am writing let me even use this particular slide as an example. So for instance, you can see I wrote emphasis in a big font, and then I wrote this other text in a small font, which means I'm trying to lay emphasis on the header. So when you are designing, you should be able to use certain elements to lay emphasis to tell a particular message, you understand, so that the audience or whoever is looking at that design grabs it at that point. So yes, when you are designing, you need to look for those elements that actually lay emphasis on the message of the design. That is important. The next principle that I'll be talking about is called proportion. Now, proportion is the size of elements in relation to one another. Larger elements in a design can be seen as more important than the smaller ones. You understand? So let me try to break this down so you get it. So in a design, all the elements cannot be one single size. For instance, you can see that I used a big font for this particular text, which is proportion, and then I use smaller fonts here. That is what proportion actually means. You understand? All your text, all your fonts, all your shapes cannot be the same size. Some have to be big, some have to be small, you understand. But the way you do this is to make sure that they both connect to each other and to unify the design, which means from the bigger text, the reader already knows that, okay, this is the bigger text, which is the header, and this header would lead me to read the smaller text, which is the subtitle or the subheading. You understand? That's what proportion actually means. Now, repetition is another principle, and repetition reinforces an idea of perception in a design. Now, this is used when you repeat the same font, or you repeat the same shape, or you repeat the same image just to lay emphasis. You understand? So let me give you an example. If you look at this diagram, you can see that we have similar shapes placed together, and they share similar colors. Now that's emphasis. You understand? So if you are designing, you cannot use a particular font type, use another font type again, use another font type, use multiple font types. It will make your design disorganized and not balanced. So you need to be able to use similar elements to make sure that your design is points to a direction and does not disorganize the mind of the audience or whoever is looking at that design. So that's why repetition is actually very important. Now the next principle I'll be talking about is called pattern. Now every design should have a pattern. Pattern refers to the repetition of a design element. So you can see this particular diagram that I used in this slide. You can see the lines. That's a pattern. So in your designs there should be a pattern, which means for instance, if your background is white, that doesn't mean that your text will be white, because your text will not even be visible at all. You understand? That doesn't mean that your shape will be white, because it won't be visible. You cannot use a white shape on a white background, or a white text on a white background. No. There needs to be that pattern of black and white. You understand? Pattern can also be seen when your background has a texture. So sometimes your background cannot just be entirely plain. Sometimes, not every time. Sometimes your background cannot just be entirely plain. You understand? If you look at this background of this slide, it is plain black. But sometimes it doesn't have to be plain. It needs to have like a pattern. You understand? There needs to be a pattern whereby there will be like, let's say, I'm trying to look for an example. But let's say instead of it being plain, there will be some patterns. You understand? On the background. You understand? That's what it means. So for instance, we have plain shirts. This is a plain white shirt. But if you look at like our native attire, you can see there is a pattern on it. So sometimes your background or your texture would have patterns, because it makes your design unique and it makes it stand out. The next principle I'm talking about is white space. Now you'll be wondering what white space is and how it's important. White space, also known as negative space, refers to areas of a design that contain no elements. You understand? This empty space is important for making a design uncluttered and also making various elements stand out. Now let me give you an example. I believe you must have seen designs, unprofessional designs that are too clustered, which means all the elements in the design are too packed. They are too many. It look like just like we Nigerians, we say when we have too many people in a particular space, we say see as them packed like sardine. You understand? So sometimes your design can be like that when you do not observe white space. Now white space is used to actually make each element stand out, and to make sure that your design is not too jam-packed, your design is not too clustered. You don't have too many details. You understand? If you look at this particular slide I am using for this tutorial, you can see that we have a lot of blank space here. Now when I say white space, it doesn't mean the space has to be white, you understand? No, it just means blank space. So if you can see a lot of blank space, I only have my small text right here, while the other place is blank. So you can see that my design is not jam-packed, you understand? And it makes you to focus on the important element, which is the text and this shape that you are seeing here. So you need to observe white space in your designs as an important element. Now, movement is another element that I'll be talking about. It's another principle I'll be talking about. Movement is when you are able to make your viewer or whoever is looking at your design move from one particular element to the other element and to the other element gradually. So for instance, when you start your design with a big header, you already know that's what the reader is going to see at first. That's big header. And after the big header, if you put in a subheading, a subtitle, that's what the person is going to look at next. Then if you put in bullet points, that's what the person is going to look at next. So that process is called movement. So you need to be able to observe this in your design. Now, the next thing I'll be talking about is variety, and this is the last principle I'll be discussing. Now, variety is whereby you use different elements to make sure that your design is not too boring or too monotonous. You understand? So sometimes people can, for instance, let me give you an example. Some beginner designers might want to make a design and then their background will be white, then their text will be white. Their text will be black, their shape will be black, their PNGs will be black, every other thing will be black, and then the background will just be white. Now that means the design is becoming too boring and too monotonous. So you need to be able to use different colors. However, you need to be careful to make sure the colors actually match. But the end game is to actually use different colors, different shapes, different elements to make sure that your design is not boring. To make sure that your design touches different areas, but it's not scattered. Don't forget, your design has to be balanced. So when you're using different fonts or different shapes or different colors, make sure you don't overdo it, you understand, so your design doesn't lose balance. But yeah, it's important that you use varieties of elements so your design is not too boring. If you have any questions, please use the comments to share them. I always look forward to understanding my viewers more, especially when they do not really comprehend what I teach in my videos. So if you have a question or you have a contribution or you have anything to say, just share your thoughts in the comments. Peace.